Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Carl Goulet, and I am the gallery director here at 5 Points. First off, all 3 exhibitions will be up through July 15th. The gallery is free and open to the public, and our hours are Tuesday through Sunday, 1 to 5 p.m., and by appointment. For the final day of the show on the 15th at 5 p.m., Paula Higa will be performing an interpretive dance amongst Debra's paper landscape, or paper installation, once again. For more information on all of the current shows and our events, please visit our website, 5pointsarts.org. Tonight's talk will be recorded and available to view at a later date. If anyone has any questions throughout tonight's conversations, you're welcome to type them in to the chat and or Q&A box, which are located at the bottom of your screens. Moderating tonight's talk is Rico Reyes. Rico is the Director of Galleries and Curator of Collections at Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. Rico also oversees the activities of the Williams Center Gallery, Grossman Gallery, Kirby Art Study Center, and the Art on Campus. Rico is an artist, curator, and cultural theorist whose 30-year experience has focused on expanding the conversation around art making and exhibitions to be more inclusive and equitable. Featured on tonight's panel, we welcome Debra Weisberg and her collaborator, Paula Higa. Their exhibition, Holding the Center, is still Redux in our West Gallery. Nikko Sedgwick's exhibition, Family Snapshots, is featured in our TDP Gallery, and A View of Humanity group exhibition in our East Gallery features the work of Karen Bonanno, Camille Eskell, Jennifer Knaus, and Gerald Saladyga. I'll pass things over to Rico and we can get started. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining us for tonight's conversation. I want to thank Carl Goulet and Judy McElhone at 5 Points Arts who invited me to moderate this talk. They've given me a fantastic challenge, and I'm glad to take it up. You know, this is 3 exhibitions and the artists of 3 exhibitions, so it's a big group of artists, and it's given me a pause to ponder, you know, which state humanity is currently in. You know, are we okay? You know, to answer these questions, I really take a granular look at each of the pieces in these 3 exhibitions, and I will save my assessment for the end of the conversation so that I don't sort of, you know, predetermine your own assessment and your own ideas. So first, I will introduce the artists and offer some tidbits of ideas to help spark your own questions from our audience, and then I will ask the artists a couple of questions to get the conversation going. So to begin with, in the West Gallery, we have Holding the Center Still, Redux, Debra Weisberg featuring Paula Higa. Drawings and paintings have come to life in this installation and activation. Debra has maintained her signature black and white palette with wires and ribbons that amalgamate to a scraggy surface and textural treatise. Material and materiality is at the core of this work, and the way the artist uses experimentation and innovation to explode the standard notions of this material, that is paper. It is no wonder that dancer and movement artist Paula Higa is drawn to the work. Weisberg creates fantastical surfaces and spaces that beg to be activated. The short clips I found online testify to the emotional gravitas of this collaboration. So please, I encourage you to attend the closing performance on Saturday, July 15th at 5 p.m. In the East Gallery, we have a group show, A View of Humanity. We have Karen Bonanno, whose paintings of women in landscape continue a long tradition of the idiom. However, her works are an interplay between this history and tradition and her own perspective on the female figure. Women at play being comfortable in their bodies makes a strong commentary that privileges the feminine gaze. Camille Eskell's work is a masterful storytelling grouping. You know, she starts with the fez as an object to launch into storytelling. And the story is epic. It goes from migration stories from Iraq to Mumbai to the US, and adds a great perspective to the Jewish diaspora from an Iraqi woman perspective. In addition to that, she also, undergirds a lot of this work with the idea of labor, the labor of merchants, the labor of fez makers, and traces the distribution of objects and the greater idea of circulation. Gerald Saladyga's contemporary icon paintings are very dynamic, using traditional notions of the golden halo, the flatness of form and perspective. The squares he used almost emulate Byzantine mosaics, and the lines follow constructivist constructions. I can see quotes from Kandinsky, Leger, and Chagall and Gorky in the work, but also pop and 80s animation and fantasy. It's a landscape painting that really plays with the notion of landscape and genre, contemporary genre paintings. Jennifer Knaus is not present, presents us with the magical realism, nature and people and women. She uses pattern to destabilize the ground and disorient the viewer, yet skillfully uses naturalistic rendering of faces and flora to ground the viewer into the picture plane. And last but not the least, we have in the TDP Gallery, we have family snapshots by Nikko Sedgwick. Nikko starts with photo transfers and manipulates them painterly, creating an interstitial space between reality and fiction, but also between image and imagination. The results are stunning yet somehow disturbing images that leaves the viewers in liminality. So my first question to the artist, and hopefully the viewers and participants in this talk today have seen the work, and if you have not, please, on a separate screen, follow them on their websites, because the work is also present there. And just sort of look at you can see the images while we have the talk. So the first question for the artists: from the work presented in these three shows, the question of humanity is at the core and plays a central role in the making of the work. Is humanity an inconvenient subject, or is it exigent and will always be at the heart of art making? So why don't I start with Camille, and then we can pass it on.
Okay. I don't think we can escape our humanity, because that's the filter through which we experience the world. So whether you're doing an abstraction or non-objective, it's still coming through the filter of the human mind. So I don't think we can shed that. It just doesn't seem possible. In terms of our humanity, I think we're constantly reassessing that and having to adjust to all the experiences we have personally and in the greater world. There is a resurgence of figurative work lately, which I thought was very interesting, because I guess it has its cycles. Did you want me to talk about it in terms of my work now?
Yeah, if you wanna specifically address one of your pieces. I mean, I love the robe, and if you could talk about that, that would be great.
Be happy to talk about it. The back is the front, as you can see. So I think you had spoken a little bit about the cultural history of my our family, and in a broader sense the community from which I sprung, and in a larger sense about women. We happen to be from the Middle East, Iraq, and then they went to Mumbai, which was Bombay then. But in my work, there's a triple whammy of old cultures. So Judaism is very old, and and in all these cultures, there's also, what should I say, a second-class status for women. So you get kind of a triple you get an overlap. So in this piece, what I wanted to do was that the top piece, which is a sari actually, was I fashioned it like a Tunisian robe. So Well, if you can, if you're familiar with that, that really looks like what the men wear. So I wanted the male upper part, even though it's a sari, which is a female garb, and from underneath that comes this train, which has I've used these figures before. I'm using a belly dancer, which has a lot of connotation in terms of femininity and the female, and what the female is good for, and the sexuality of the female. And what I've done is I made their fists in a sign of triumph, meaning they're getting out of that thing, even though they were as harem girls in a way. So that medallion is based on one of the designs that's in the sari, the golden area. And I placed those fists in blue all around that inner wreath on the bottom area. And the two on the bottom, which look like this, the blue, they almost look like they're shackled. So there's a dichotomy there. Are they in triumph or are they still shackled?
Yeah.
So it's all ambiguous.
Yeah.
So the idea of it being out from under is the idea of coming out from under.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue to Karen Bonanno's work in terms of her women in, in her paintings, because I feel like those pieces also have the kind of duality about it where, they present themselves as strong characters, but also there's a sensitivity and a vulnerability there. So Karen.
Yes, I agree with that statement. The women in these paintings all know each other. They're familiar with each other. They're comfortable in their presence. But a lot of them, like, they don't. They're not looking at each other. They're just like a snapshot in time, I think. And like in the staircase here, the woman behind has her hand on the woman in front's shoulder. So there is a familiarity there. There's an intimacy that I think is present in all of my work. I actually specifically don't get very detailed in the faces because I want them to be not one individual person, but just a figure in the space. It could be anybody. It could be any woman, all women.
And is that your take on my question about humanity? Is that you want all women to be sort of in this comfortable, intimate space?
Yes. It's just the iconic woman, or just not a specific. They're not portraits. They're just figures in a landscape, occupying the same space. They're usually pretty pleasant. We have a lot of stuff going on in our world. So this is like my little piece of heaven, little sanctuary, if you will. So yeah.
Yeah. And then I think I would like to go to Gerald next, because your figures in your landscape have the same kind of presence, but it functions quite differently from Karen's. So maybe talk about the question first in terms of the question about humanity, and then you can pick a painting to expound upon.
Okay. My paintings about humanity, about people, come from a very religious background, Eastern European, and which I kind of left, but which hasn't left me. And humanity in them is that I don't consider them any racial type, black, white, red, or anything like that. I just enjoyed the color in them, so that's what they became. Although I really understand that you can't escape the color of people's skin. The humanity is in the, okay, the humanity is in the way I look at them, the way they look back at me. When I begin a painting, I'm not quite sure how it's going to end. And I usually create a face that looks back at me and tries to challenge me, to say, what are you doing? What's going on in the world? And what are you going to do about it? And my response usually is, well, I'm painting a painting about it, and I have some history in it, and I can't take my eyes off of it. And so everything comes with a human meaning. The landscapes are purposeful. The people are purposeful. The halos are purposeful. And the halos just came on as I liked the background so much of the painting, I didn't want to cover it up. So I had to find a way to do that. And that added to a different humanity to the people in the painting and to the men, and mostly men. Newer ones have women in it. And so this one, for example, I usually have a wall between backing everybody up. But I began it and again, wanted to put a relationship between the man and the boy. Not necessarily father-son, not necessarily brother, but just the relationship between them. And it comes very iconic. It comes very Byzantine, and which is very humanistic to me, as even including Gothic and Fra Angelico and all the early Renaissance paintings. People standing there looking right at you, and you're looking back at them, and tell me what you're saying. And that's the humanity I think about when I'm doing the painting.
Yeah, it's a really great, I feel like it's a synthesis of like Russian and Eastern European traditions, you know, from Byzantine all the way to constructivist. And it's just, it really shows your sort of attention to those traditions. I want to go next to Nikko, because I feel like you are doing something similar with your figuration, but very completely different from Gerald's background. Your background is very abstracted and it's almost gone. And so, you know, for Nikko, you know, in terms of the question about humanity, you know, how does the background really help your statement about sort of, you know, the family of man that you quoted with Icon?
Well, to tell you the truth, what's going on in the background really is more of a formal device than part of the concept. I mean, I do believe that the two big pieces that are in the show are actually paint. So it's before I started to get into the glitter thing. But as you can see, some of the paint, or actually quite a bit of it, is metallic paint. And so I had been going for this sort of metallic thing. And then when I came upon the glitter that I used in some of the smaller pieces, I really found that it interacted with the light in such a way where it almost makes the piece exude its own light. And it almost worked like a stained glass window a little bit. So in that way, I think it can kind of be tied into the gentleman whose work we were just talking about. I'm so sorry, I forgot.
Gerald.
Gerald, I'm so bad with names. Please pardon me. But it brings almost like a religious aspect to it that I'm not necessarily thinking of, but with the glitter and that sort of stained glass effect that I sort of picked up on sort of after the fact, like, wow, you know, it's kind of a revelation for me. Like, wow, I love the way it reflects the light, works with the light, and therefore exudes its own light. And then I made that connection with like a stained glass window, which who doesn't love a stained glass window? It's just the most beautiful backlit, glowing thing you've ever seen.
Yeah, definitely. And that brings me to Debra and Paula. You know, Debra, your work has always had this really fantastic kind of abstraction about it, and the way that you use materials. And I feel like some of the gestures that Nikko was doing with this background has come to life with this work, you know, where you have given us the background and we are now the figures in the painting, but the painting is the space. You know, so maybe address that, you know, the aspect of humanity and really expanding your work from 2D to 3D to space and activation.
Right. So, you know, I guess the question is how do you define humanity in the absence of the figure in the artwork? And for me, it's about the audience moving and recognizing themselves and in as they move through my pieces and make their way through the space. And, you know, I think Paula amplifies when she's moving, and the dance and the tension and the kind of vulnerability she exposes through her body and her movements, which I think just takes what a lovely shot, which just takes the work to another level, you know, and you know, I all my work, the works on paper. I did handmade works on paper, also collaborating with the artist Michelle Samore. So they are Tyvek prints. I use mono prints embedded in pulp, and using pulp painting. So there's always this incredible tactility and layering and an archaeology of experience, of process that, you know, that the work, I hope in the final analysis reveals to the viewer, again, as a kind of embodiment experience. So it's, I think for me, when I'm talking about humanity, it's a physicality, and it's really thinking about how the viewer kind of engages in the work. So Paula, you want to jump in here? Is Paula there? Paula?
I'm trying to, okay, I'm trying to. I think what Debra said is, I agree, because for me, in order to express through dance, you know, all the kinesthetic and emotional response on Debra's work, I need to be very humanistic, you know, because I need to engage my general senses. I need to be aware of each of her artwork, and then what they are resonating, you know, with my emotions and my feelings, and how do I fit in that space.
Right.
So, and then this 3D idea, Debra, that I am kind of an extension of her work.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I saw the, you know, beginning piece, but the pictures and the clips that I've seen really, you know, it really does activate the space. And then the costuming, could you talk about the costuming? Is that something that you and Debra worked together?
Yeah, I made it. So it's called Redux because I showed an iteration of this in Boston last year, and my installations, I retain parts of prior, again, the whole archaeology kind of image. I retain parts of prior work, and you know, sometimes break it down, build new sections to it, and you know, so a lot of this, you know, well, Paula, you want to, you know, a lot of this work, you know, the costume itself was a response to we used latex. We used, I decided not to go into a black and white, but use something that kind of had a blood feeling, like a circulation, and it was very stretchy, and it was very asymmetrical. So we kind of pushed, Paula pushed me into this other direction, because I didn't, I even though it was me building it, there was a lot of her sensibility and encouragement and guidance in how this costume came to being. So it's stitched together. Yeah.
To add a little bit, we also, Debra, concentrate more of the material. We're going to talk later a little bit on one side, because for me it was I was improvising, so it was a good resource for me to sense my center, search of this off balance, and where's my balance, where's my center of gravity. And but we had a lot of conversations about.
Yeah, I mean, and the irony is it's called holding the center still, and when we were making the costume, we had to be really careful about, how much it was going to hit into the pieces when she starts flying around. Is it going to restrict her movement? We want this whole expansion of the body. So how is this, these linear striations of the costume going to impact how she moves through the space and how it relates to the audience, as she's flailing around. Is it going to whip the audience?
This photo is not the original costume, because there is I wear like a pants, like black pants with some wings also on the side that also gives this sensation of a kinesthetic motion and spiral. So this was my rehearsal, but it looks good too.
Great. So that brings me to my second question. Since we started talking about materials, so materially, there is a careful attention paid to medium and its manipulations, navigating between deconstruction and reconstruction. There emerges an expressed desire to arrive at an intersection, visually, emotionally, or otherwise. So what does this moment of encounter do to your work? Is it the point where you can say the piece is done, or is it a catalyst to keep going? Why don't we start with Nikko?
Yeah, the first step in my process is, ironically or counterintuitively, I destroy the image with solvents. And the acid causes the emulsion in the image to deteriorate and melt. And as soon as I do that, I feel that it takes the photograph out of the realm of photography. To tell you the truth, photography for me is really a springboard to go someplace else with my painting. It also imbues the subject with an animation and a vitality, and it also gives lie to that notion of a photograph distilling a moment of time. I think it breaks sort of the time-space continuum in that way. And so the destroying of the image is really just the first step. It also makes the painting, it also makes the photograph more painterly, with all of the gestures and all of that kind of thing. And being a painter, obviously that's something that I'm striving for. And then the second step is creating an abstract painting over which I can transfer the image. And there's a peeling away of the layers, because when I transfer the photo, I transfer it face down. And so what I'm left with is the back of the photo, which is really just paper. And so there's an excavation, there's a lot of peeling away of layers that feels like an exhuming of something that's been entombed. And that layering, it's a very profound metaphor, because it deals with layers of time, layers of skin, layers of identity, what we choose to reveal, what we obscure, layers of relationships. It's just a rich metaphor that plays profoundly. In the newer work, like the one that's up on there now, I have taken away the entire backing. So you don't get that much. I hadn't gotten to the point yet in my work where I had decided where I actually wanted to leave a bunch of the paper, and I wanted to leave the frayed edges that make it look like skin and give the viewer an insight into that whole idea of excavation and layers and uncovering something that's been buried.
Yeah, definitely. I love this piece as well, because I think, you know, the success of it is really the translucency of the photography that then becomes part of the painting surface.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go back to Debra and Paula, because I feel like deconstruction is so much part of your process. And then, but then you come up with these new forms out of the paper.
Yeah. So, you know, so my installation is made up of, you know, dozens and dozens of small pieces, kind of by accretion. So the scale, although, you know, I feel like I activated the entire architectural space and thought about weight shifting of, you know, of the paper, the walls, the works on the walls versus the, you know, the works are that are on the floor. You know, it has a feeling of, you know, entropy. While it's growing, it's also kind of decaying at the same time. And, you know, I think the translucence, you know, the paper itself, so the sculptures are made out of actually camping foam. It's a polypropylene that's covered with rice paper and this really black matte pigment. So there, and how I built it up, I thought about kind of the weight reversal, that the weight in the floor piece is precariously sort of at the top. So, you know, this idea of fragility not only comes from the materiality, but I think also from the sculptural aspects that I think about in, you know, in how I build the piece and how I think about gravity. And I think that relates a lot to movement and dance, about the body, you know, the center of. Paula, you want to jump in there about dance?
Yeah, because sometimes, you know, people, they misunderstand improvisation and they think that, just do whatever you want. But actually, you need these resources, you know. So for me, not only the shape, but also like the material, the wire, you know, twisting, the lightness of the paper, the black and white duality. So everything that I was, you know, exposed to when I was performing, and in this exhibition specifically, there were even more, you know, artwork. So this is all resources for me to investigate movement. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I know what I'm doing. So I think this is something that it's important to say when we are improvising, because it was a 10-minute improvisation. And I need to feed, you know, my brain with these resources in order to generate movement and see where I go. So it's important.
That's a great segue to Camille's work in terms of, you know, the materials talking about movement, because it's not just movement within space, but it's a movement within the globe, in the circulation of aspect of that. So maybe Camille, talk about, you know, your material choice and how does it really talk about, you know, this encounter? Is it a catalyst or is it a stopping moment?
Materials. Well, I'm choosing certain materials because of what they represent. So in a lot of the pieces, I'm mixing something that speaks of the Middle East with other aspects that are of India. And then in some of the pieces, not necessarily these, but there are some Jewish stars, and then there are in some of the pieces, this tassel is it's the fringes of a prayer shawl that the Jewish men wear, but that particular, they've knotted differently. So that particular style is what we call Sephardic, which is from the Middle East and Spain, as opposed to Eastern Europe and Europe. They knot them differently. So every aspect of the work is chosen very kind of carefully. What I also got tons of stuff. What I do is I have the image in my head, like I have a sense of what I want it to look like. The challenge is, how am I going to get this thing to come together? And there's a lot of detail work involved in that. So because there's so many different types of materials, not only fabrics, but embellishments, and then of course you have the digital image, which is the base of it. It's a lot of figuring out. There's a lot of problem solving involved in these pieces. Tremendous amount of problem solving.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry if I didn't answer you.
No, that's great. I think, Carl, if you can zoom into into those pictures so we can see the photos or the photo-based images that are on them, because those details are really fantastic.
Thank you. So I'll tell you what that is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So this is the fez on legs.
This is a fez cap on legs. Now I have a whole series of cast bodies from a previous series. So I tend to bring things together. This series started with the fez cap because, in a way, both grandfathers sold and traded fez caps in India. So from Iraq, they went to India, and not only the Muslims, the Jews and the Christians and everyone wore fez caps in the Ottoman Empire. But so they manufactured them, the Jews wore them. And those two figures are me and my sister, wearing some kind of little Indian garb. And what I did was I embedded them on that's a segment. See the Indian women walking next to them? That is a small segment of a massive hanging that is in the Boston Museum, in the MFA. So a little piece of that. And then what happens is the two figures fade into the golden women on the bottom. So it's purposely fading. And they're almost becoming flat in a way. Are they real? Are they not real? And a lot of these things, that was a cushion. That the fez cap and the silk and all that was a cushion. I took the cushion apart. I had these are earrings from these embellishments are my aunts from India. The trimmings and all I have to find. This is paper. I had to figure out how to make matching patterns on legs. Like it's not symmetric. And I got that from somewhere else. The tray ended up being from not a bazaar, but those consignment from London. So things come to me from all different places, but that's where my luck is. That's maybe it's the idea of the vision is going out into the world and bringing me what I need, but that's happened many times.
Yeah.
So I just have to figure out how it all goes together.
You're definitely considering how goods circulate throughout the world to make your work. The painters in this group, have been dealing with this kind of notion of deconstruction and reconstruction because, we take minerals and stones and we pound them to powder, mix them with oils and reconstruct them as paint, right? And then we play with the paint. And so I think, let's go with Karen. How does the material prefigure in the kind of work that you do? And, how does it, the encounter with the materials, how does it define or affect your work?
First of all, I work in oils, and I just love the medium of paint. I love painting with it, drawing with it. I think it's a very sensual material, and I paint pretty thickly with a lot of brush strokes being seen and stuff. So, and I usually start my paintings with kind of just like a gesture of the figures. All these paintings and the scenes just, I just imagine them. They're just out of my head. So I'll just like kind of start doodling some gestures and kind of build a relationship between the figures in that doodling and kind of build a painting around it, like, and the narrative kind of forms as I'm going. And a lot of times it'll start as like one figure, two figures, three figures, go back to two figures, depending on if, someone leads the conversation, and I'm fine with that. And sometimes it goes from an interior scene to, a landscape, and then back to an interior. It depends on the day. And just what the figures are telling me, really. So, and as far as like, when something is complete, that's a hard one, because sometimes I'll show a piece, which I think is complete, and I'll take it home. And like a month later, I'm messing with it again. So, which I did with a couple of these. So, it's never really complete.
Yeah, sometimes we're looking for an intellectual visual completion, but we're actually looking for that emotional completion, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So Gerald, in terms of your paintings, you mentioned in your statement that you build it from the bottom up. Is that correct?
That's
how
very
does
correct.
material work with your work?
Here's the point. I have to admit that I get all my supplies from Home Depot, basically hardware stores around the area. And I use rollers, paintbrushes, and sanders to make my paintings. And, so the way they're made, to get that over with, is that there's 4 or 5 layers of a background paint on top of each other, sand it back down, so I get that kind of goldy kind of look. And then from the bottom on up, I start painting in the background. And what's kind of interesting, my dad built our house after World War II, around 1948. And building has always been a part of me. I had bricks as a little kid, this as a little kid, all of this kind of stuff, but I'm always building, and I'm still building. And using the materials of builders and finishers. But so that all kind of comes into play with that. So it's kind of it's constructivist, it's building, it's Gothic, and I began to put some meaning into it as I'm going along. For example, the one that you're just showing now, the 2 saints in the Ukraine. I started that just before the war started, and began to put different things of the Ukraine. For example, the cathedral, St. Sophia's. And in the background on both sides, there's references to Babi Yar, the land or that the Nazis murdered all the Jews and anybody else they didn't like, buried them there, then dug them up and burned bodies and made ashes out of them. And so I have political ideas behind it. I have religious ideas behind it, but the basic idea is that of building, which I'm still working on, new paintings of buildings. Yes, I start at the bottom because that's where it's a lot easier to paint a building behind a building than a building in front of the building, and get the paint all messed up. And the gentlemen with the 2 ties, Cyril and Methodius, who were the saints of the Eastern European who developed the Cyrillic vocabulary. they have 1950s shirts and wall ties on, and like my brother and I used to wear all the time. So it all comes into that, and hopefully there's some. I think you can pick up a lot of emotion in these guys.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for indulging me with my questions. And so Carl, do we have any questions in the chat or in the Q&A?
Okay, so I'd like to ask Nikko to talk about the photographs he uses. Did he create all of the original images himself? From Fred Tulloch.
I don't create any of the images. As I said before, photography really isn't my thing. I don't trust myself to take photographs. They're all either family photos or family adjacent or very close friends. You know, I like the archetypal images that people end up taking in their family snapshots. You know, pregnant with your first child, a wedding pictures, you know, that kind of a thing, because it speaks to our humanity. And I think everybody can relate to images like that. Everybody goes through that. And as this body of work is inspired by the Edward Steichen exhibition emanating from the Metropolitan Museum in 1955, The Family of Man, that became a very famous book that a lot of people know about. It allows me to throw a wide net in terms of using people from all different backgrounds and ethnicities and nationalities. But I didn't create any of the photographs. I actually have thought about possibly doing that because sometimes I'm looking for an image that I can't find. Also, I have found that because I blow the images up exponentially large, I mean, they'll start off as, you know, 8x10s or smaller. The clarity really has to be able to withstand that kind of increase in size. And interestingly enough, older photographs somehow have more information and more pixels that can withstand that kind of increase in size.
Yeah, silver density of old photographs is much more than current photographs. So yeah, definitely.
Another reason I had thought about it when I was talking about the color before, all of these images, because the photograph has to be developed in such a way that the acid will respond. I see that I'm totally in the shadows here. Excuse me. In order for the photograph to respond interact with the acid in the way that I want it to, they have to start off as black and white photographs. So a way for me to imbue the image with color was to paint color on the background and transfer the image, take away the back of the photograph till there's no more paper, and all that's left is the very thin filament of emulsion that carries the image. And that's why everything that's beneath the emulsion comes through. But I don't take any of the photographs. Can't take them, sadly.
All right, does anyone have any other questions, or did any of the artists?
There's another one in the chat.
To Debra and Paula, I'm interested in knowing if your collaboration changed your work, and if so, how? Has the work itself changed? Has the approach to your work changed, etc.?
I think when for doing this installation, I felt a lot freer and a lot more bolder, and thinking way more about the architecture and thinking about the whole room as a space for her to move in, and than I did before. I really thought about passageways, and you know, I thought about the window and the outside inside, and I think that's all due to Paula making me aware, getting me out of my head, you know, out of the head of the maker and into the head of the audience, you know, because, you know, dance is a performance. And I feel like I have kind of moved into that realm a little bit of installation being a kind of theatrical art form in some ways. And so when I cited the piece, I cited it, you know, close to that window, using the ledge and going outside to see how that you know, what the pedestrian, what the passerby would see, and making sure that it was engaging from that point of view. So yeah, I think, you know, I think day to day in the studio, maybe I don't hear the voice of Paula Higa, but when I'm putting together these pieces and spending that time setting up the space, I think of myself in the realm of a performer more.
Yeah, for me, it's always a different experience. And this, like I said, this one was especially something that challenged me as a dancer because there were more artwork. And like Debra said, the window, you know, so there was also the audience passing by that they were not in the space. And I think there's always a change. It's never the same, you know, the experience will never be the same. And the way that I see her work and the way that I embody her work, there's always be different every time I perform in her installation.
Yeah, and I think the video, so, you know, we have the video on of a performance that was the Paula edited on a loop that gives people a sense of what it is when a dancer moves through the space. And I'm hoping that informs of how, you know, how they look at the installation and adds on a layer of meaning and a different vision of than just a static artwork.
And like I was saying, Debra, also the audience, the way that, you know, they are in the space with the art and the dance and the music.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
always, you know, observing and how, you know, when I get close to the audience, sometimes they don't move. And I have to find my way between the installation and the audience. So it's always a different experience.
Yeah. And the temptation for them to touch my work, which they did, which people don't do with painting as much as they do with three-dimensional work or work that is in their space. You know, there's no pedestal. I'm at, you know, the object is at the viewpoint of the audience. You know, there's no separation. So there's that temptation, like I'm going to get into the work. There's no boundaries that like there is with a piece that's on the wall.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there other questions from our audience?
No popping out.
So I'm going to answer my own question at the beginning, right? So are we okay? And I feel like these three shows are definitely, you know, my answer would be a definite yes, because, you know, the imagination and sort of the kind of futuristic notions that are embedded in the group show, you know, even though Debra's work has this really interesting notion of decay and darkness and gravity, but it also has, you know, fluidity and lightness and the activation of the space, and it makes it a really hopeful space. And then with Nikko's family snapshot, you know, it's like we're just imagining the future of relationships, right? We are looking at how families you know, can be chosen and can be created, and we can place ourselves in any situation or landscape or space that we have. So I think that, you know, these three shows definitely answers a big yes for me. We got one more question from Amy. This is a general making question for everybody. How do you break through being stuck in making your work? What is something you tell yourself or do to break barriers of doubt?
I'll
Show
work
up.
it. Exactly. Just keep on making it work.
Yeah.
Picking up a brush and a roller, sorry.
Position recently because the material that I'm working with, I only have so much of it. And I'm making a mantle, which is a long kind of a train. And I'm still working out how to resolve that thing, and it's like been taking me forever. So you just keep working and figuring out other solutions until something clicks. It might take time. It does take time, a lot of the time.
And Gerald, you were saying?
I was saying, basically for me is to build a stretcher, cover it with canvas, pick up a brush, paint and roller and get to work. And look at what you did, see what you can do now.
Yeah, Karen.
If I'm stuck or something, a lot of times I'll take an old painting that I don't like and work from that. So I'm creating something new, but it's a dialogue between what I had previously. So that kind of helps me, challenges me, and makes me interested in doing something new. So.
Well, sometimes I'll just read. I'll read conversations. Right now I'm reading the Conversations by Felita Barlow, who just passed away, a great sculptor, installation artist. Sometimes I'll go into nature, and as someone who's been in the studio for many decades, the doubt doesn't really go away. I just manage it. Do you know what I mean? It coexists with me, and I don't let it rule me the way it did when I was younger. I just go like, hello, it's there, been here before, and I try not to take it too seriously because it's just cyclical. And no matter how many grants you get or how many shows, I still think, you don't want it to go to the dark side of where it paralyzes you, but I think having a little kernel of doubt keeps one's on one's toes and pushing and going forward, and questioning. I think that's really important, as long as you don't use it to kind of beat yourself up, and just know that time in the studio is not time in capitalism. You know what I mean? It's not like you punch in and you're going to get this much for your bang for your buck. It just isn't, and you just have to recognize that. And sometimes the gallery system doesn't acknowledge that because they want more and more and be faster, and we're at a crossroads. It doesn't really work like that. So for artists who don't have a whole factory of people working for them, it's challenging, but most of us don't, and it's just having to honor what it means and the time it takes, and knows that it takes what it takes,
Yeah, so I just wanted to take the last couple of minutes to thank and honor our fantastic artists. So Karen, Gerald, Nikko, Paula, Camille, Debra, and Jen, who is not present with us. Thank you for making the work, and thank you for continuing to make the work and giving us things to look at and things to think about and things to experience. And I'm going to pass it over to Carl, because I know there's a lot of things happening at 5 Points that we should know about. Carl.
Yeah, so thank you, Rico. So as I said in the beginning, there is a closing reception for this show, specifically for Debra and Paula's dance performance, and that is July 15th at 5 p.m. Apart from the gallery, we have a reception for our print juried show at the Art Center, and that is, I believe, from 2 to 4 on July 15th as well. We also have a Small Works juried exhibition coming up, which we'll be posting very soon, so keep an eye out for that. And plenty of workshops and everything going up at the Art Center, so sign up, join our newsletter, and keep up to date on everything 5 Points. All right.
Yeah, please see the show.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Kelsey. Thank
Bye
you.
now. Thank you.
There.